What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you some highlights from the Isometric sale that is happening over on Steam, but to be clear, is actually being hosted itself by Meta Publishing, which is a publishing label that Owlcat Games works with pretty often, and something that has become a bit of a yearly event, but just do keep in mind it is not technically speaking a sale hosted by Steam, but rather just a sale that happens over there. Now, as somebody who has been known to dabble in isometric games here and there, this is the exact type of thing that I enjoy covering, and I thought I would share some of my favorites that are on deep discounts of the roughly 200 or so games that are participating in this. But before we jump in fully, I did want to just briefly mention that it looks like some games are participating but are not actually on sale, so I don't really understand what's going on there. So I have chosen to just not mention those ones, in case you happen to be wondering about it. Other than that, I'm going to be moving pretty quick here. We've got a lot of games to get through, but do keep in mind I have reviewed almost all of these, so if you want more information about it, feel free to search the channel for it. You'll almost certainly find it. We are also going to be moving in alphabetical order for the most part. There's one or two exceptions to that, but for the most part, that's what this is organized by. And so let's go ahead and get on with it. Starting with Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Let's say you love Baldur's Gate 3, you wanted to try the originals. Well, you can. For 70% off, you can grab both of the enhanced editions for $6 each, and there's a bundle with the other Infinity Engine games where you can get all of them for really cheap. They are also priced individually at about $6 a piece as well, including things like Planescape Torment as well as Icewind Dale. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2 are critically acclaimed CRPGs, and it's no small wonder why. They're great games, but admittedly difficult to get into these days. In fact, one of my most watched videos on the channel to this day is teaching people how to play them, which I mention because if you choose to pick this up, you may want to give that video a watch. If you can get past that barrier to entry, they are a really fantastic time. In a completely different tone, we then have Bloomtown. Bloomtown is a deceptively, I would say, cutesy title. It is admittedly very cutesy. However, it handles some pretty tough subject matter, actually. You play as two kids staying at their grandparents while their parents are going through a divorce over a summer, and you get involved with a deal with Satan, who puts you to work trying to get rid of some demons that have infested the town you find yourself in, and it gets a little dark in places, actually. It's honestly a great game to play over the summer, and at 60% off, you can pick it up for $10, and I had a pretty good time with it. Moving on though, next I want to talk about Broken Roads, a post-apocalyptic CRPG set in the Australian outback. It got off to a bit of a rough start with a lot of patches over time done by essentially the one person that was left for the team. It has gotten better. I would still not call it an amazing CRPG or anything, but if you're looking to pick it up for cheap and give it a try, it is 75% off, bringing it down to about $9 US. Shifting gears yet again, we then have the TRPG of Classified France 44, which is a game about, of course, World War II. It's a pretty fun TRPG. I would say it's probably not going to do anything that would really wow you. The TRPG space is pretty saturated and it's hard for those games to stand out. But the World War II setting combined with an emphasis on different mission types, some of them are more like stealth focused, that kind of thing. There's a fun experience to be had there, and it is 80% off, bringing it down to about $7. Now, this next game I haven't really had an opportunity to talk about in quite some time, and that is Dark Envoy and its sort of predecessor, Tower of Time. You can buy these together as a bundle for 78% off, bringing it down to about $15 US. Now, it looks like the base game for each of these is not on sale, but the bundle to buy them together is. They are pretty interesting games. Tower of Time in particular is a little bit odd, leans a little more into the strategy side of things, to be honest, but it actually has a really great story, like surprisingly so, and they took that story and kind of kept it going in a sort of sequel with Dark Envoy. Dark Envoy is more of a smaller scale CRPG and is also a lot of fun. It has gotten significantly better since it released as well, but both of these do utilize real-time with pause combat, which is just not everybody's jam. The Neverwinter Nights 1 Enhanced Edition is also on sale for 65% off, bringing it down to $7 for the base game. There is actually a lot of DLC for the Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition, or the original version even, I guess, but those DLCs individually are also on sale sale and pretty cheap, but I mentioned that just because you might want to play through the base game and decide if it's for you before you jump fully into the DLC. This is another game that is quite old, but is historically significant, and if you're into CRPGs and that's important to you, worth checking out. There's also the modular content setup it has that can just give you tons and tons of hours of playtime, and it's a fantastic experience if you're up for that, but is admittedly not everybody's cup of tea these days. Following on from that, we then have Esoteric Ebb. Esoteric Ebb is a release from this year, actually. It joined the sale. It is 20% off, bringing it down to just $20 US. This is a narrative title utilizing a D&D rule set, which is an interesting combination. It is very similar to things like Disco Elysium. If you've played that, you kind of get the gist of it. It's a lot of fun. One of my favorites from this year. Definitely recommend that one. A TRPG I haven't talked about in a while, being Marvel's Midnight Suns, is 80% off for $16 when it comes to the base game. The DLCs are also on sale. There's also a lot of DLC for that game that I don't think is very good, to be honest. However, while the friendship simulator side of things was not my cup of tea, the combat side of Midnight Suns was surprisingly good. And I'm not usually a big card guy, but the way they set it up there was a lot of fun. And it's worth checking out if you're into that, but personally, I didn't enjoy like half of it, which was the friendship side of things. Now, as Owlcat is loosely involved in this via Meta Publishing, only correct that we eventually mention some games both published by them and some of their own, and we're going to start that with Rue Valley. Rue Valley is another sort of Disco Elysium-like narrative game that is 50% off, bringing it down to about $7.50. Now, this game is a sort of introspective narrative title. That's just not going to be for everybody as a baseline. I would look into it, but if you are up for that kind of experience, I think it can be a fun game to explore. But keep in mind, the tone is a little different than you may expect. Next up, 7, The Days Long Gone, is 75% off, bringing it down to $7.50. This is a wonderfully strange little game that does a lot of unique stuff that I would not be able to accurately describe here in such a short time frame. I would recommend you look up a video on it, but it is a tremendous little title that got off to a very rough start and was cleaned up over time, and I was eventually able to review it. A very long-standing bug kept it basically unplayable for me for quite some time, and for a very cheap price, I definitely think it's worth checking out if you have the time. But we've still got quite a few to go, so let's keep it moving. We've got Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2, which are both participating in this sale. Pillars of Eternity 1, with its recently added turn-based mode, which I did an individual review of and talked about, it has been doing quite well. I think it's a great CRPG, if a little dry in tone for some people. It is nonetheless 60% off as a bundle with all of its DLC, which brings it down to $12 US. Pillars of Eternity 2 is also 60% off with all of its DLC, also bringing it down to $12 US. I love the Pillars series. I've made many videos on it and things surrounding it, and as tempted as I am to sit here and talk about it forever, I'm gonna, again, keep it moving. Coming back specifically to the things that Owlcat has been putting out recently, I have to say I was surprised that they got Kingmaker involved in the sale. So if you're unaware, Owlcat no longer owns the rights to Pathfinder Kingmaker. They've been trying to get them back, but have not had any luck on that front thus far. But nonetheless, Kingmaker is participating here. It is 82% off, bringing it down to $3.50 for the base game, which is very cheap. And this is another situation where I would strongly encourage you to play the base game and see what you think of it before you jump into the DLCs. Kingmaker is a very particular game, let's say. I have a very love-hate relationship with it myself, but I do just love the sequel, Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, which is 75% off, bringing it down to $5 US for the base game. And then all of the individual DLCs, of which there are quite a few, are also 70% off. You can pick those up individually for a couple bucks as well. And that is a monumental amount of game for a very cheap price. To put that in perspective for you, if you include the time I played Wrath of the Righteous in its various pre-release states, the review copy, the beta, all that stuff, plus my time with the actual release version, I have 900-ish hours in it total. Incredible game. But I would be remiss not to mention Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader as well. I just wanted to mention that it is also on sale, 60% off, $20 for the base game. I will say we are still waiting on that game's last DLC, and if you haven't bought it by now, you may just want to hold off until that is complete at this point, because it's pretty close to being there. but nonetheless, it's on sale, it's participating, wanted to mention it. Coming up towards the end, we then have Weird West, technically it's an MSIM, but an isometric one at that, and Weird West is 85% off, bringing it down to $6 US, and it is a delightfully weird and unique game. It is, I would say, different from most things you have probably played, and I would recommend it on that alone. I enjoyed that little game a lot. Third from the bottom, however, we've got Tyranny at 63% off, bringing it down to $16 US with its DLC, Bastard's Wound, and Tyranny is Obsidian's lesser-known CRPG that is also really good. I love the story and the setup for this one. Unfortunately, they don't even own the rights to it anymore. I think Paradox does. So as much as we all want that sequel, probably not going to happen. Nonetheless, though, Tyranny has just, again, a really cool setup, a fantastic magic system that you typically don't see in isometric games anyway, and if you want to check it out for yourself, it is pretty cheap these days. Next up, we've got Torment, Tides of Numenera, a spiritual successor to Planescape Torment, which again is also on sale for about $6. Tides of Numenera is 75% off, bringing it down to $8 US, and Tides of Numenera is also an interesting game that I am not completely enamored with personally, but it tried to do some interesting things with like its crises situations you have to resolve instead of like more straight up combat stuff you can get into, even though that's also here. But it's primarily a narrative game, very wordy as you would imagine, and I think it's definitely worth experiencing if nothing else. And then last on the list we have the ever-present XCOM 1 and 2. So XCOM 1 is 50% off, bringing it down to $10 US with its DLC. XCOM 2 and its DLC are 85% off, bringing it down to $7 US. And considering that these two games are still considered the absolute pinnacle of the TRPG genre, they are most certainly worth your time, and the good news is, as acclaimed as they are, they're also regularly on sale, so don't feel too bad if you miss this one. There will be other opportunities. That, however, is pretty much going to wrap up these highlights for the isometric sale on Steam, though do keep in mind there are plenty of other games participating beyond these, and hopefully this will be an opportunity for people to pick up some of these honestly pretty incredible experiences for pretty cheap. I've enjoyed a lot of these games personally, and I hope other people have the opportunity to do so, which is where I'm going to leave off this particular video. Certainly hope you enjoyed it. If you did, by all means, like, comment, subscribe, all the YouTube jazz. But regardless of any of that, truly, just thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.